Good morning, everybody. Hey, the mics work, first time. That never happens. How you going? Welcome to the first day of GCAP 2019. Can I hear a Monday morning cheer from the crowd, please? Yeah, awesome. My name is Rae Johnson. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a video game journalist, but probably more of an advocate, to be honest. I'm currently working as the editor of Junkie and the host of that startup show. I'm also an ambassador for the Australian STEM Video Game Challenge and a mentor with the Working Lunch, supporting underrepresented entry-level folks in all areas of the games industry. But most importantly, I am your MC for GCAP, which is now in its 14th year, and this is the only event of its kind in the region, so we're incredibly lucky to have it. And before I introduce the next people to take to the stage, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which we are gathered, where sovereignty was never ceded. The theme of this year's GCAP is lighting the way, as you may have seen, it's kind of everywhere. And for one of the best examples of this vision, the games community need look no further than the sovereign First Nations people of this land. First Nations people have built the most sophisticated, supportive and peaceful cultures in human history, underpinned by a robust economy, all designed from the beginning with society and the environment in mind. These rich and diverse cultures survive in spite of attempts to erase them, demonstrating the power and resilience of the world's oldest continuing cultures. So when we talk about having vision and resilience and the ability to work collectively and honour a core set of beliefs, it's hard to think of a better inspiration for the future of the games industry. And it is with that sentiment that I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any of my First Nations brothers or sisters, aunties or uncles who may be in the room with us this morning. Now, before we get started, I've got some quick housekeeping rules. Antisocial behaviour will not be tolerated, folks. I'm sure you all know that. But if you see something that doesn't seem quite right, say something to someone. You know, grab a volunteer and have a chat. And in the unlikely event of an emergency situation, please follow the instructions given to you by the Convention Centre staff. Please feel free to hashtag everything that is going on the event. We're expecting to go a little bit off this week, I reckon, but GCAP19 is the preferred hashtag for this event. I would now like to introduce to the stage the Honourable Martin Foley, the Minister for Mental Health, Minister for Equality and Minister for Creative Industries.
Thanks, Rae, and like you, I also begin by acknowledging that we meet here on the traditional lands of the Kulin Nation, and I also pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging of the Wurundjeri and their close cousins, the Bunurong. Could I also acknowledge Melissa, the interim CEO of the Games Development Association Australia, Will Pugh, founder of Crows, and indeed everyone from the games development community and the industry supporters. Welcome to Melbourne and welcome to this wonderful and, I hope, inspiring Games Connect Asia Pacific 2019. To those of you who are visiting Melbourne and Victoria, also welcome. Not just a very good place to visit, also the Games capital of Australia, and we like to think a particularly inclusive community that brings gamers and games communities together in a way for mutual benefit. And that's because for over 30 years, Victoria has acted as pretty much a bit of a hub for our games community, growing the talent pool, driving education, driving innovation and driving business opportunities that flow from that. Victoria accounts for over half, about 55% of Australia's games industry income. Home to more than 100 companies and employing over 1,200 people and growing at an enormous rate. And we produce games that stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's best. Games development community in Australia, the games development community in Melbourne rightly sees its role as part of a global connected community of gamers and games development and the enormous diversity and richness that goes with that. We know that there's a lot to discuss this year, particularly since last year's conference we've seen enormous and continued change sweep through the games development industry and the gaming communities. That's why this year's theme for GCAP, Lighting the Way, is in a way seeking to reflect that industry in flux and the enormous continuous change that's working through. The program around Shine a Light is all about shining a light as to what's going to work, what's best practice in 2019 and beyond. And I applaud the Games Development Association for taking that brave snapshot of what the industry's challenges are and really trying to cram in an enormous amount of material for you all in the coming days. As part of that, you'll hear amazing leaders in our field over the next 3 days. There'll be plenty of opportunities for thought-provoking, creative and innovative sessions, and I'm sure through those collaborations that come with that, there'll be connections with industry peers that will help build a fruitful future. That's why our government is committed to supporting the likes of both GCAP and Melbourne International Games Week. They are such an important opportunity for the community of gamers and games developers to come together. They are such an important opportunity to build those links and be part of the global community trends and opportunities that flow from that. Beyond the business side, there's also the industry side of make sure that the social impact of what we do as gamers applies and games industry applies. And we do so because games, more than just about any other social or commercial activity at the moment, given its enormous growth, its enormous diversity, its enormous challenges, connects people in mainstream ways and in other ways well beyond the capacities of just about any other sector. Your industry connects people. The fact that Games Week is also coinciding with Mental Health Week in Victoria, with Mental Health Day on World Mental Health Day on Thursday, reflects too good an opportunity, particularly as I'm also the Minister for Mental Health, to spend a bit of time reflecting on those wider opportunities that games and gaming communities can offer. We know from research that there is significant well-being opportunities that your work delivers for people right across the globe. People of all ages and backgrounds are increasingly turning to games as a means of not just recreation, but of socially connecting with each other, with families, with friends and new communities in a way that really does build genuine social capital returns in a variety of interesting ways that we are still coming to grips to. But in the same way as everything can have a happy side, there's also the opportunities for negative outcomes, and the responsibility on games developers and gaming sector to manage all of these conflicting roles is perhaps as important as it's ever been. But turning to games to relax, turning to games to relieve stress, and turning to games to connect is an increasingly global trend. So for many, your games really do represent a lifeline and an opportunity to engage in ways that are increasingly difficult outside of the games world. You are the custodians of powerful vehicles impacting countless lives. And speaking with my third ministerial hat on, that of the Minister for Equality, the fact is that your games communities can connect marginalised and sometimes excluded communities and individuals in a way that very few others do. So it's terrific to see that the Melbourne Queer Games Festival is also an important part of this week's lineup, demonstrating that LGBTIQ gamers and games developers are central to your vision. Your work does have a massive impact on a social level, a cultural level, and of course an economic level. So I encourage you all to make the most of the opportunities for engaging and learning and collaborating whilst you're here in Melbourne. Network with your colleagues equally from around the world, collaborate, share your thoughts and build your ideas, and as the slogan says, light the way, strive for excellence. For the Victorians here today, be assured that the Victorian Government knows the worth and the value of your industry, not just in economic terms, but in social and community capital terms, and we're going to back you all the way. So can I congratulate Melissa and the team of contributors who have put together this genuinely illuminating and challenging program for everyone here. Please enjoy GCAP and the Melbourne International Games Week and have a fantastic time while you're doing it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Martin. Now Melissa Lancuba from the GDAA, Interim CEO, would like to say a few words about this year's theme.
Hello, I can't believe a whole year has passed since we last gathered here. It's great to be back. I apologise if I cry. I'm very tired and I'm very proud of my team. So this year's theme, Lighting the Way, is a play on the lighthouse as a symbol of guidance. It's about lighthouses pointing to safe harbour, a light in the darkness. While we believe this theme to be positive, it does acknowledge that there are undeniable risks in the making of games, with submerged dangers and strong currents ready to just suck you down. But that's not to say that there isn't a safe pathway to success. We can't do it alone. I think one of the most important things that we can do as an industry is come together and work to lighting the way for each other. Like the seaside communities that built lighthouses to protect their sailors, we must do the same. Especially considering how changeable our industry is and how talented we all are. We've got to get out of our silos and start actually communicating to each other across the disciplines of game dev so that we can move forward together. So the question I ask you is, how do you light the way and who lights yours? I invite you to reflect on this over the next 3 days as professionals from all corners of game dev come together to give you their interpretation of lighting the way. But before we get to the opening keynote, please indulge me in a few thank yous. First, thank you to the team. Kerry, Sav, Terry, Lewis, Hannah and Chad, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your 6 months of incredibly hard work. Secondly, this event would not be possible without the overwhelming generosity of our sponsors, especially our major partner, Unreal Engine, Creative Victoria, Yodo One Games and Wargaming Sydney. Finally, thanks to all of our speakers, judges, curators, volunteers, friends, emotional support people, and of course, all of you. I hope you enjoy the event as much as we enjoyed putting it together for you. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Now, after joining Ubisoft Montreal as a community manager in 1997, our next guest went on to work as a game designer, narrative designer, and a writer on games that you might have heard of, like Mass Effect and Assassin's Creed, and there's this Watch Dogs thing, apparently. She's currently working as a narrative director at Warner Brothers Games Montreal, and we're delighted to have her as our opening keynote for GCAP 2019. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Anne Lemay.
There we go. Hi, everyone. I'm thankful and honored to have been invited here today to give this keynote. Many thanks to all the fine folks for organizing GCAP who made this happen, and to Lauren Stone and Alexandra Swartz for putting my name forward for this. Yes. When I accepted the invitation to come here, I did what any self-respecting writer does. I did some research, and what about every how-to and guide I found told me was this. You have to share about yourself, you have to use some anecdotes, and you have to make people laugh, which is, as far as I'm concerned, the hardest one of all. One down, partly. So to start this off, I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm 47 years old. I worked on a lot of games that I'm not going to go through because they're all on screen, which is what a PowerPoint is for. I'm currently a narrative director, as Rae said, after having done many other things. I have 3 cats, 1 husband. His name is Eric. He also works in the industry. I have social anxiety. I am terrified of public speaking. You can ask me about fountain pens and horses and cats, and I would talk about that on stage forever. But talking about myself and my experiences is another story. I love nail polish. My favorite brand is actually an Australian brand, Picture Polish, so you should check it out. The reason I decided to come and to do this keynote, despite my fear of public speaking, is because the thematic resonated for me so much. So I'm here today. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Thank you for being here, all of you in this room, and for listening to me. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself to give you some context. I'm going to talk about my career, my dreams, the hard times and the good times, the good and the bad decisions. I'm going to talk about some dark things and some happy things and some hope. And I hope that by sharing some of my experiences, you can avoid walking into some of the harder walls that I walked in repeatedly, as we all want to do before we learn our lesson. 22 years of making games is a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to stick to the highlights for the early years and share some of those anecdotes I'm supposed to be sharing. Please note that as a visitor here, I'm the one with the accent. If I am talking too fast for you, please someone wave at me to slow me down. I tend to speed up when I'm anxious. So, there we go. The slides are broken. I'm not going to worry about this anymore. It's fine. I'm not good with slides anyway. We're going to do much better if I just ignore them, guys. So, I have been playing games since the Intellivision 2. I started in 1983 when my dad bought my first console. I played games such as Burger Time, Night Stalkers, and Legend of Zelda. I had a great slide with The Legend of Zelda. Take your sword, it's dangerous out there. The first time I started playing Zelda, the first thing I did 5 minutes after starting the game was run out of my bedroom, straight for the graph paper, because I'd realized that when you hit things, you could discover secret passages. And I tracked every single square block in that game. My parents were very confused and were wondering where all that paper was coming from, but since it seemed to keep me busy and happy, they just quietly backed out of my room and let me do my thing. Fast forward to my early university years, where I got my parents to buy me a PC under pretext of it being to do my university papers. It was not, dear audience. And to give you some context, my first personal computer was an IBM that ran on DOS with those big-ass thick screens. And I used to connect to the internet using a phone line and a modem. And that was to replace my old-fashioned typewriter. I did use my PC for university papers, but mostly I played adventure games. And they were fantastic. And that is what really, really got me to consistently just stay into games and play video games every chance I had. Between school and horseback riding competition, I was finding every single adventure and RPG game I could get my hands on. Gabriel Knight, Eye of the Beholder, Seventh Guest, Planescape Torment, Baldur's Gate, Monkey Island, the King Quest series. All of these games were the staple of my early years in games for my teenage years. And while I was playing those games, I studied art history at UQAM and design art, which is a very liberal program at Concordia. And after doing all that, I also taught myself HTML, ended up taking a job as a web developer. And then 1997 happened. In 1997, Ubisoft opened their doors in Montreal. It was the first time a game company came to town, but also their goal was basically to train everyone from the ground up, which was pretty miraculous. when you think about it. It's not something you see these days, and I don't think I've actually ever seen that at all, except for that one time in Montreal when Ubisoft did that. They were hiring up hundreds of people and training them to make games. It was a lot of us starting out at the same time. So I sent in my resume. I hadn't even thought about making games before that, and I said, why not? And they called me while I was on showgrounds horseback riding. So they asked, hey, do you want to come for an interview? And I'm like, yeah, sure, when? And they're like, how about in 2 hours? So I drove, and I was off the island on the South Shore, wearing my riding gear, got changed, hopped in the car, drove right over there and did my interview while smelling of horse, which thankfully no one commented on. And I got the job, amazingly enough. I got the job because, of all things, my BA in art history. So art history guys can get you jobs, no matter what they say. Now, I started as a comm dev, and to make this very clear, back then comm dev was dirt simple. It is not the art and the skill it is today. I went through several roles while I was there. I was a graphic designer, a UX designer, a game designer. And after about spending a month teaching myself to be a level designer and realizing I did not want to do that. Kudos to level designers, you guys, you're all awesome. I sat down with the creative director at the time, and we talked about what I wanted to do, and they transferred me into writing in around 2004. I haven't looked back since, to be honest. I've been writing fan fiction online before, but being paid to write was a little bit mind-boggling, and getting the opportunity seemed like a thing I should never let go of. However, and I do mean to say this, all of the different jobs I did before have things that help me hone my skill set for what I do today as a writer. Specifically, the work I did in usability and UX, wireframing, if you'll look it up later, but the ability to think about all the scenarios and all the pathways and menus applies itself perfectly to writing stories. So as you can see, my entry into games was unique. If you told me back then that I would be making games, never mind writing games, I wouldn't have believed you. Not in a million years, not until Ubisoft showed up in town and the opportunity presented itself. But it's not like the concept of women making games was impossible back then. That's not what surprised me, it was just that I hadn't thought of it. Because all of the games that I played had women making them. The women were on the boxes. They had interviews in the guides. They were in all the magazine articles, talking about Jane Jensen and Roberta Williams, for example. And you have to give you historical context, we didn't have social media back then. Facebook wouldn't be invented until 2004, and Twitter didn't start until 2006, for example. And this was 1997 and before that. So it wasn't hard to find out about women making games that I loved. They were everywhere in a completely matter-of-fact way, and they were impossible to miss. So yeah, when the time came to apply to go for a job making video games, I said, of course I can do that. Look at all these other amazing people doing that. The first years at Ubisoft were amazing. We had a unique advantage. We were all on the same foot in terms of learning. All of us were equals in every single sense of the word. And it really shaped the early years of the company, but also the social fabric of the projects that we were on. It was a weirdly perfect playing level field, and without social media, we were in our own cocoon while creating. So I thought about talking about how things progressed over the years, but I have a time limit and thoughts on this conference theme. So I'm going to skip, and we're going to get real here. We're going to talk about burnout. I've tried to retire from the games industry twice in my career. Once in the early years. I loved my job so much, you will all be familiar with this. I loved my job so much that I let it own me, and I ended being pushed to a point where I just could not anymore. I'm talking migraines, bleeding stomach ulcers, sort of could not anymore. Too many of us experience this. Our passion overrules our sense of self-preservation. We do it over and over. It's really, really hard not to fall for the trap of do it for your passion, do it for love, do it for the people around you. So about 3 years in my career in games, I left the industry. Just walked out for a whole year, and that's where I went to telecom and learned about UX and usability. But I came back to making games because someone good reached out to me, someone that I trusted. And also because they were working on adventure games, and I could not say no to that. passion get the better of us always. The second time I tried to retire was much more recent. It was in 2016, to be specific, not that long ago. I was determined this time that it would be a full retirement from the game industry. I was very, very done. It didn't happen overnight, though. During the time where I started thinking about maybe the fact that I was done, I was writing one of the characters that I'm the proudest of. Thing is, pretty much from when I started to think him up, I felt like he would be my swan song for the industry. I had a sense that things were coming to an end. So I put a lot of myself in that character. Probably too much. Nakmor Drac from Mass Effect Andromeda was born of many of the things I was struggling with at the time. Things that had been, in fact, building up for years and years. All of my doubts and fears about staying in the industry, about whether I was relevant or not, about feeling unheard, unwanted, not valued, unappreciated, and maybe just not good enough, really. It was about my experience and knowledge being dismissed very often, too often I felt. Or maybe it's just that I wasn't valuable or as valuable as I thought I was. I was in my early 40s by then, which a lot of people get told you're too old to be making games at that age. But also, I was feeling like maybe things had changed and gone beyond me, and I just wasn't catching up. Maybe it was time for me to step aside. And I was tired. I was tired of fighting for things that I believed in, things I felt were important, things I felt other people should care about. I was also tired of just not feeling safe. All of these feelings went into writing Drac. He was an old Krogan, the oldest known at that time, and with Murder Grandpa, which was also his production nickname, a character who's centuries older than anyone he knew, who remembered a homeworld that no one else did, a society that none of his people had even lived in at that point. With him, I wrote about alienation, about not feeling as though one belongs in a world that's passed you by and moved on without you, about wanting something better for a new generation while being worried about just being a hindrance to them. I wrote about a fierce, unyielding love that knew no compromises. I wrote about wanting more for others. I wrote about crippling pain, self-doubt, and a hope that didn't really know if it should anymore, even hope. I wrote about age and chronic pain, about depression, about not being aware that one was suffering of depression, about presenting a facade in order to hide everything I just mentioned. I hoped that people would see him and see what was underneath. I hope people who had folks in their lives going through these things would understand maybe just a little bit what that meant. And I hope that people who met Drac would see that maybe there was room for them yet, while I couldn't even see that space for myself. Of course, while I was writing Drac, the most important thing about him was that he was fundamentally wrong about everything he felt. He still had a lot to give. He just couldn't see it. And it's funny how you can create something and send a message out that you feel is very important and not realize that it can apply to you as well. I had been making games for about 17, 18 years while I was writing him. And I really felt that once he was done, maybe I was too. So when I finished writing him, I took a bow. Because beyond all of the doubts, all of the fear, and everything that was dragging me under, most of all, I was just really, really tired. I am talking about a decade of accumulated exhaustion, a sleep debt I didn't even know how to identify, even that has actively destroyed my life. My doctor kept warning me about my heart, scolding me about all the stress I was under, even as I couldn't clearly define why I was so stressed. It's funny in how sacrificing ourselves to our passion, we imperil the very organ that metaphorically drives our dreams. But chronic sleep loss is a very real thing, and it has very nasty symptoms that we are trained by society to shrug off, to ignore the signals of our bodies are sending us because we expected to cater to the cultural ideal of passion for our art. Because if we bend, we get told, oh, you just can't hack it. Because if we question what's happening to our health, we get told we need to suffer for our passion. Because we get told that's what it takes to create art. Because we get told we're weak if we try to take a break. And that, dear audience, is bullshit. Chronic sleep loss kills. It's just as insidious as any stress-related illness. My judgment was clouded. My blood pressure had shot through the roof. I was at a point where I had situational depression, which is a real thing, which I didn't even know about. Getting up was hard, regardless of what time it was. I was dealing with chronic pain and everything hurt all the time on top of that. I was exhausted every single waking moment, and I had no emotional defenses left whatsoever. I cried a lot, and I didn't even know how to solve the most basic problem. So once my work on DRAC was done, I retired. And don't get me wrong, I was very, very lucky in a position to do so. I had the support of my husband. I had money set aside. My personal debts were all cleared, and I could file for unemployment. I'm very aware of how lucky I was that I could do that. My plan was to take a year off to write a book, and then reassess if I maybe wanted to go freelance. But you know what? Instead, I slept for 3 months straight. I slept 12 hours a day plus 2 naps a day for 3 months. I was so tired. And I paid off most of my sleep debt in that time, to a point where I started waking up at 7 in the morning, aware and functional, and I did not even remember what it meant to feel that way. So much that at one point I was wondering if I should go see a doctor, because it was such a weird feeling. And then at the 3-month mark, day for day, a wonderful woman who I've known for a very long time at Ubisoft reached out to me and asked me to come back. And my audience was, hell no. My answer, it was hell no. I said, no, I'm not coming back. You can't make me. And then I said, but I miss your face, because you're awesome. So let us go have lunch together, please, because I have time on my hands right now, which I was enjoying very much. And we went to lunch, and about 5 minutes in, she cheated, like the big cheating cheater she is, and she said, how would you feel about writing for a museum tour set in Assassin's Creed? Dear audience, BA in art history. My answer was, F you, book the interview, I'm in. And that, as they say, pun very intended, is history. I am very proud of the work we did in bringing Discovery to our ancient Egypt to life. And I was so, so thankful to the people at Ubisoft who wanted me on the project. It was an amazing experience from start to end. It was uplifting. It was uncomplicated. And I earnestly believe part of this was because I'd paid so much of my sleep debt off that I came back to games as a new person. I was alert. I was sharp. Thinking was easy. Problems were nothing. Everything could be solved. And it was. My relationships with people were fantastic. I liked myself as a human being. And that is no small blessing. I kept my hours to 8 a day. I was very firm on that, and I had the advantage that they wanted me. So I set that line, and I maybe did 2 or 3 hours extra once or twice within the entire production. And at the end of it, I was okay. In fact, my return to the industry has been, both at Ubisoft and Warner Brothers, some of the very best times I've had making games. Obviously, I'm fortunate that I was in a position where taking 3 months to sleep was a thing I could do. But also, I was fortunate that my return happened with teams and people that provided a nurturing environment, with people who valued my experience and my contributions and wanted everything I could bring to a team. That foundation helped me rediscover my love of making video games, and to do so on my terms. There are things now that I refuse to compromise on. Having people you work with that value you, and what you bring to a team, these were the essentials that I look for. It's a line in the sand, and it's very clear. I need a safe environment to work in. I need to ensure that the people I manage and the people that I work with are recognized and have a safe environment to working as well. I need to provide that to them. And if it's with me, that's awesome. And if it happens to be elsewhere, that is also equally awesome, and I will help them achieve that. I support, always. When I tried to retire the second time, my husband and my friends were upset, not at me, just that it brought me to that point. Obviously, because I was so tired and because of all the damage accumulated over the years and with bad managers, I didn't think I could come back. But they felt that I had a lot to offer and a lot of experience to share with others. So when I talked to him and them about coming back that second time, yes, partly it was because art history, but also it was because I had decided that I would change many of my goals. I wanted to help others. And this segues into what I wrote with Drax, Maybe I'm Worth Something story arc, because that was ultimately his story arc, was him realizing, hey, I have something to give, to contribute. The end of his story, his core motivation, was wanting to see the younger generation take over and do great, wonderful, better things. And I wanted that. I wanted that a lot. So this is what motivated me to stay, to come back. I knew that I had something to contribute, something important, that it wasn't about me, and that I could do this. I could be in a position to help people with their careers. I could be in a position to open up doors for younger devs, for diverse folks of all ages in the industry, to offer advice to anyone I know, or anyone who just might need it, to nurture and empower, to offer opportunities, to leverage my networks, to be in a position to protect and to advocate. This is what keeps me here now. Before, I used to resist attempts to promote me because I just wanted to sit in my corner and write stories. When I came back, I openly spoke about wanting leadership positions. I'm trying to do more now and be more for everyone around me. A better person, but also a better manager, a better mentor, a better opener of doors. And that is something all of us with enough years or enough power in the industry should be doing, whatever the method we choose. We should all be openers of doors. We should not just be sharing our love of making games with others. We should open doors for them, and we should be welcoming, and even that is not quite enough. We should make sure always that folks stay welcome in the industry, that they feel they have a place with us, because this industry is for everyone. We need to do this every day, as individuals and as a community. Mentoring is one of the ways to do that. Now, we often say find a good mentor, as if that, will solve everything. That person will solve our skill set. Off we will go into the sunset to success. That's not quite how it works. A mentor can teach us how to do something, yes. But if that is all you do as a mentor, you're only hitting one facet of how you should be supporting someone. It's a short-term investment rather than a long-term one. And dear audience, we can all do more. We can support, we can empower, we can advise, we can protect. Mentoring writers, in my experience, has in fact rarely been about helping people learn how to write for games. Learning to write for games is a thing done through iteration and practice. It is more than anything else about engaging in the act of writing on a daily basis on whatever project you're working on. So yes, I can give pointers early on. I can offer direction. But the actual improvement of the skill set is done through actual work. It is also highly adaptive, since writing for games changes every time depending not only on the genre, but on a given studio, on a given project, and on a given tool. I'm pretty sure this applies to different skill sets and disciplines within our industry as well. What I have noticed since I've come back to the industry with the folks that I've been mentoring has been vastly different than just, here's how you write a game. When I mentor, I very quickly end up being a helper. I advise, I counsel, I support, I provide a sanity check, a sounding board. Folks often more need help dealing with navigating the ecosystem of a company. They need tools that help them deal with teams and company politics. They want to know how to talk to someone. They want to know who to talk to solve a problem. They need to figure out how to create and maintain healthy professional relationships, to figure out if a problem can be solved, or even if a person can be solved. Mentors have privilege. This is often by simple virtue of having a title that places you higher up in the food chain, by the simple fact that we have more experience, more contacts, that we are more visible. Because of the inherent power dynamic between a mentor and a mentee, we have power, and we should always remember that. A mentor can ask hard questions, but they should never ever make a mentee feel uncomfortable in a personal level. A good mentor will encourage someone to talk to others, to seek out different mentors and different opinions and different solutions from different people. Sometimes a mentor will even agree that you're not a good fit and will help you find someone else to mentor you. A good mentor will make any given conversation about the mentee, their problems, what they are dealing with. A good mentor will offer a range of methods to fix a problem. And while it may be about a task, they will also be ready to help with situations both social and managerial. They will help a mentee figure out what they want from their career, but they will never tell a mentee what their career should be. And if they don't know something, they will just say so and work with the mentee to see how solutions can be found, how they can protect themselves, or even who else might have the answer. A good mentor will also know when to tell you it's time to move on, because sometimes you need to hear that. Sometimes you need to hear you're not the problem. The project is not the problem. Maybe it's just not the right match at the right time. A good mentor will always have your mental and physical well-being in mind, first and foremost. I'm going to share some of the advice I consider most important these days. There's 4. 3 of them are fairly short, the others can be a bit longer. 1, as I just said, it's okay to walk away. A project, a game is not worth your health, your happiness, or who you become when you're an unhappy person. Sometimes it's not even anyone's fault. For whatever reasons, the human connection just isn't there. The project changed from what it was supposed to be, or what drew you to it in the first place. Or the people that you wanted to work with have left for reasons that are perfectly valid. For any number of reasons, it just may not be working out anymore. You do not have to finish a game if it will harm or destroy you in the process. It is not a price worth paying. It is okay to walk away. There are more projects out there. 2, post-project depression is a very real thing, and we have all, or will all, experience it at some point. It takes more than a few weeks to process an entire production. Even a normal, non-traumatic project requires downtime so that we can reset our minds and creativity for something new. End of project depression is a thing that devs often don't even know to be watchful for, aren't even aware of. If a production was traumatic, then it's even worse. We need rest and recovery time. As creatives, we're indoctrinated by society to believe we should do things because of our passion for our art and dedication to our work. But part of any craft or job is to take care of ourselves and to process the impact the art of creating has had on us. It is hard to do good art when we're tired and depressed. 3, this is a personal conclusion I have come to after many years of making games. Choose people, not projects. I know, the big IP, they're nice and all, but you'll often get people selling you on that point, and that point alone, and that is a trap. It is the people you work with that will determine if a project is good and if your experience is satisfying. I have met amazing people in this industry, many of whom I am in touch with to this day, and that I call friends, gladly so. They have made my life, both in the professional and the personal, better. I hope I've done a little bit of that for them too in the return. And those are the people you should look for to work with. As Mr. Rogers would say, look for the good neighbors and be a good neighbor too. 4, build your support network. This has been addressed a little bit before. Sometimes we can't find our way out of a bad situation, and we can't mentally gear ourselves up to walk away from a toxic manager or a toxic project. Toxic work environments usually tend to creep up on us, and sometimes it can take months, even years, to realize that the problem isn't us. It's the environment we're in. This is where support networks come in. Having been in the industry when social media wasn't even a thing, when ease of access to devs in other cities and other companies was non-existent. I agree that you can criticize social media for a lot of things, and I understand the need to withdraw sometimes. But there is one single amazing, untouchable thing it does, and it breaks down the barrier of distance. We are a global community. So build yourself a support network, one that fundamentally is not composed of people in your immediate geographical area. Of course, have local friends. But there is a little world of people out there that you can draw from for support, for perspective, for that desperately needed sanity check when no one else is awake nearby to talk to you. 24 hours, 7. Find your Facebook groups, find your Twitter friends, reach out to folks and to your good neighbors across the world. We are all in this because we love doing this. We all have that as common ground. Your support network should be composed of friends, of colleagues you respect, and also both of these together at the same time. A support network can save your soul in dark times, like it did mine, especially if what you're dealing with is a toxic work environment. When I was at my lowest, my husband, my friends, and the people that I worked with helped me to realize that I mattered as a person and as a creator, that I was a good writer, a good dev, and a good person. A good network will be your anchor in bad times and in good times. And you get to be the anchor for someone else too. It took me a long time and a lot of ups and downs for me to get where I am today. But now my motto is, the sum total of my experiences is something I can leverage to help others. A few notes on lighting the way. We often talk about the legacy we leave behind. Often people consider that to be the games they've worked on and to be the names in the credits. It's a worthy dream. I'm not going to knock on it. It was mine for a long time. In the latter part of my career, though, what I hope to leave behind has changed. My most important legacy these days is embodied by the people I leave behind, hopefully for the better. Those that I help by cracking a door open, by sending a resume, by giving a referral, by reaching out to talk to them or answering their questions when they reach out to talk to me. I am proud of the work I have done, but I am much prouder of the people I've worked with in the past, or who I work with now, and who I hope to work with one day. The past few years have been eye-opening and humbling and wonderful, and I've been learning every day that the world continues to take a lot of different shape and meanings. I know to my bones that being well rested is truly central to keeping me in games. I know that I want to stay in this industry. And above all, I want to help shine a light for the new generations. So remember this: get some sleep, take care of yourself, take care of those around you. Mr. Rogers knew where it was at. Find your good people and your good neighbors. A few final words on some perspective, and I apologize, I've yet to manage to get through this last bit without crying. On a final note, I would like to offer a perspective, one that spans the 22 years I've been in the industry. It's a very personal one. It is founded in my experiences, which are specific to being a white, straight woman, relatively personable sometimes, who has worked in AAA in the same city all this time. But I'm sharing it, and I hope it brings something to all of you as well. Things are hard and scary right now in the world. When it comes to our industry and its darker sides, we often wonder if anything has changed in the years, or anything will change in the years to come. We wonder if we have managed to change something, anything for the better. If the fights are worthwhile. You know which fights I mean, but also you all know which your own fights are. There are words I did not hear back in 1997, 1998, and the early 2000s. These are words that have existed for a while now today, that some of you here have known your entire career and take as matter of fact. But back then, they were not part of the industry vernacular. They weren't on the general radar. There was no actual sense of them. We just did not know them. Words such as diversity, LGBTQIA and all the variants, inclusion, gender fluid, lesbian, asexual, queer, intersex, femme, gender neutral, representation, ace, bisexual, people of color, two-spirit, autism, gay, non-binary, pansexual, genderqueer, transgender, they as a pronoun, and so many more. These words were not part of our vocabulary back then, but they are now. It is not everything as it should be, and it's not everything we want, and it's not fast enough. But change has happened and is going to keep happening. It is unstoppable. The battles and losses and victories we see today didn't even exist back when I started making games, because these battles were not even being fought, much less in the open like they are now. And that, dearly beloved audience, that is change. That is a bright, shining, guiding light. And that is why it is worth to me to be in this industry and to use my power for good, to be an opener of doors, to help foster voices that need to be heard, to fight the good fight, to fight the battles that are behind the scenes, never seen, to enact change bit by tiny little bit, because what seems small today will be huge in years to come. We all need to keep pushing for more so that our games keeps growing for the better, so that our community keeps growing for the better, and the world too as a result. Change is an integral part of what makes us human. Our ability, our power as an industry and a community is in changing the people around us for the better. We need to do this for those who are preparing for their first interview, who are applying to game schools today. We do this for those who just got their gaming console ever last week. We do this for the next generation to join us in making the games that we love so that we can share this love with the world. Let us all keep changing our industry for the better. Let us all support one another. And let us all keep lighting the way for each other and for those who will join us in the days and years to come. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful GCAP.
Wow, thank you so much, Anne. That was beautiful. And that does bring the opening session of the first day of GCAP to a close. If you haven't picked up your ticket and bag, please go do that at registration now. And otherwise, please go forth, learn from each other, and I'll see you all soon.